Welcome to the DX Today podcast, where you get facts, not hype. And welcome to the deep dive. If you're an enterprise leader in 2025, you are sitting right in the middle of a massive paradox. You're either terrified of, or you're heavily reliant on, the explosion of artificial intelligence across your organization.
And probably both at the same time.
Exactly. Probably both.
Yeah.
Today, our mission is pretty clear. We are going to cut through all the operational chaos and, quickly unpack the complex landscape of enterprise AI oversight, policy, and long-term strategy.
We've synthesized a pretty comprehensive stack of reports and analysis to answer one really crucial question for you.
And that question is, how exactly do you govern a technology that is, by its very design, moving faster than your policy team can possibly react?
That speed, that difference in velocity between the tech and the control, that is precisely what we call the algorithmic paradox. The source material is, it's unanimous on this point. AI is universally recognized as the single primary engine for future productivity, efficiency, and, ultimately for economic dominance. No serious company can afford to just ignore it.
Of course not.
But, and here's the paradox, the actual operational footprint of AI inside most large organizations, where it's running, what data it's touching, who's deploying it, it remains largely invisible to the executive leadership.
The very people tasked with managing its risk.
Exactly. That invisibility is the fundamental governance gap we need to close. And we need to close it immediately.
And what our sources suggest is that a massive shift is needed. This lack of visibility, it translates directly into critical liabilities that stretch far, far beyond the traditional scope of the IT department.
We're not just talking about a tech problem here.
Not at all. We are talking about severe regulatory risks, massive financial exposure from data breaches, and potentially devastating reputational damage if an algorithm makes a biased or a flawed decision in a high-stakes scenario.
And when that happens, who's accountable? Who signs off on that decision?
That's the billion-dollar question. The required shift, we're told, is profound.
Yeah.
You have to move past that reactive, sort of restrictive posture, that old school thinking of just saying no or trying to block employee access.
It just doesn't work anymore.
It doesn't. You have to pivot to a proactive, integrated governance framework that prioritizes absolute visibility, mandated accountability, and critically, the technical operationalization of trust.
So what does this pivotal strategic shift actually look like on the ground? Over the next, say, 35 minutes, we are going to systematically unpack this.
Where are we starting?
We'll start with the immediate invisible threat of shadow AI and the technical methods you need to actually find it. Then we'll analyze the really dramatic and contradictory global regulatory divergence happening between the EU and the US.
And
Finally, we'll look at the technical controls, things like explainable AI, bias auditing, and privacy-enhancing technologies that you need to operationalize trust in your models and ensure they comply with standards like NIST and ISO.
All right, let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Let's start right where the risk is highest. The immediate and, frankly, most pervasive threat, which we're calling the crisis of algorithmic visibility.
Right.
The core challenge here is, on the surface, very straightforward. Enterprise leaders fundamentally do not know where AI is being used in their organizations.
And the root cause of this massive blind spot is, it's the sheer ease of access to consumer-grade generative AI tools.
We're talking about those readily available chatbots, the large language models, the coding assistants.
Anything you can sign up for with a credit card and an email.
Exactly. They are so incredibly easy to access that any employee, regardless of their clearance level, can just completely circumvent the traditional slow-moving IT procurement and compliance processes with a single click.
And what's fascinating here is the sheer speed of adoption. The source material defines this phenomenon as shadow AI.
Shadow AI.
It's the use of these unapproved, public-facing AI solutions without any formal sign-off from IT, procurement, or the compliance teams.
Now, this concept sounds familiar. We've dealt with shadow IT for decades.
Right. Employees downloading their own Dropbox or using some unsanctioned project management app.
But the sources are clear that shadow AI carries significantly higher stakes. And this is the part I think leaders really need to grasp.
It's a critical distinction, and here's why. Generative AI models inherently involve the active processing of, and crucially, learning from the data you feed them.
So it's not just sitting on a server somewhere.
Not at all. If an employee uploads sensitive customer data, that data isn't just being stored insecurely. It's potentially being used to train an external third-party model. You're putting your proprietary information into a totally unknown environment with zero control or oversight.
The risk exposure is, well, it's catastrophic compared to traditional shadow IT.
It's a completely different class of risk.
That distinction is absolutely critical, and the raw data behind this threat should be setting off alarms in every C-suite, especially for the legal and security teams.
The numbers are pretty stark.
Our sources reveal that 59% of employees admit to using AI tools that lack employer approval. We're not talking about some fringe group.
No, that's a clear majority of the workforce. They are actively doing this.
But it's the next number, the one that tracks the behavior of that 59%. That is the real liability bomb.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
Of those employees who confess to using unapproved AI, a staggering 75%, three-quarters, also confess to sharing potentially sensitive internal information with those external platforms.
Okay, let's just slow down and consider the sheer gravity of that 75% statistic for a second.
Please do.
Think about what that sensitive information includes. We're talking employee PAI, customer records, proprietary internal documents, drafts of confidential contracts, maybe even your most valuable asset, your source code. So when three-quarters of your employees using these unapproved tools are actively feeding them your company's secrets, you don't have a compliance problem anymore. You have an urgent, systemic, widespread security crisis that is actually accelerating your innovation risk.
And it comes with a real, quantifiable financial cost.
It absolutely does. Research from IBM suggests that shadow AI usage can escalate the average cost of a data breach by approximately $670,000.
Wow. And that's just the average.
That's the average. And that figure, that 670, it's just the cost of containing the data breach itself.
It doesn't factor in any of the other fallout.
Not at all. It completely fails to factor in the potential reputational damage if, say, a major client's data gets exposed, or the monumental regulatory fines we're going to discuss later when we talk about the EU AI Act.
So the takeaway here is simple. The enterprise has to move beyond just trying to block these tools.
Which is a losing game anyway.
It's a losing game of whack-a-mole against employee ingenuity, let's be honest. The goal has to be establishing a sophisticated, integrated framework that can manage this pervasive risk by first finding it and then governing it.
So if that first non-negotiable mandate for leadership is achieving visibility, then the prerequisite for control is what the sources are emphatically calling AI discovery.
Right, discovery.
This is the essential continuous process of identifying and systematically cataloging every single AI application, integration, and user activity across the entire organization.
And you really need to capture everything. The obvious purpose-built apps like ChatGPT or Claude, and critically, the embedded AI features that are hidden inside the standard SaaS tools you already use every day.
That's a huge blind spot for many.
It is. So let's unpack the magnitude of this challenge. The sources suggest that the AI landscape is expanding exponentially. We're talking about an estimated 1,000 unique new AI tools hitting the market every single year.
1,000 a year. You can't possibly keep up with that pace using a manual spreadsheet or some annual audit. It's just not feasible.
No way. You need automated, multi-pronged discovery methods that can recognize usage patterns and connections, regardless of whether the specific tool is known or previously approved. So, for the leaders listening, what are the key technical mechanisms they need to deploy?
There are 4 key methodologies, and we need to walk through all of them because they are not interchangeable. They each offer different advantages, and, crucially, they all suffer from different limitations based on how your employees work.
So no single solution is enough?
No, you absolutely need a layered approach.
Okay, let's start with what feels like the most low-hanging fruit.
That would be the first method, email-based discovery. The mechanism here is pretty simple. It involves connecting directly to your corporate email provider and analyzing traffic related to account creation.
So it's looking for what, exactly?
Things like billing notifications, multi-factor authentication enrollment messages, and those welcome to our service notifications from new vendors.
I see. And the advantage there is?
The primary advantage is that it captures the critical long tail of unknown apps. All those tools that individual employees sign up for on a whim using a corporate address. It also provides fantastic, verifiable historical insight into past usage, which is essential for understanding your pre-existing risk profile.
But it must have a weakness.
Yeah.
What does it miss?
The limitation is significant. It completely misses any usage if the employee uses a personal email account to sign up, or if they only engage in browser-only sessions where no official account was ever created or built.
Okay, so that captures the account creation and the transactional evidence. But that doesn't tell us what the user is actually doing with the tool.
Exactly.
That leads us to monitoring the activity itself, right? Which brings us to our second method, browser-based discovery.
Precisely. This method is typically deployed via lightweight browser extensions or agents that monitor web visits, logins, and critically, what's being typed into user input fields.
Ah, so it's right there on the endpoint.
Exactly. Because it's running locally, it provides incredibly granular activity data. This is crucial for real-time intervention capabilities.
Give me an example of that.
For instance, it can detect when an employee is about to paste sensitive proprietary code into an unapproved LLM prompt window and then flag or even block the action before any data leakage occurs.
That's powerful, but the limitation seems obvious.
It is. This method is heavily dependent on having that extension installed across all your endpoints. It completely misses usage on mobile devices or personal unmanaged devices that aren't configured with the corporate extension.
That sounds like a perpetual coverage issue, especially in a hybrid or remote work environment.
It is.
Traditionally, organizations relied on a perimeter defense, which would be our third method, network monitoring, or what we all know as cloud access security brokers, CASBs. But in a perimeterless world, is CASB fundamentally obsolete now, or does it still have a crucial role?
That's a great and very necessary question to challenge. CASB systems, they work by inspecting user traffic as it passes through firewalls, VPNs, or desktop agents. They flag access to known AI domains based on IP ranges or domain names.
And its advantage?
The advantage is that it effectively monitors cloud service access for any users routing through your network, and it lets you apply centralized security policies. If you know this AI tool is bad or non-compliant, you can block its domain system-wide. It is still crucial for monitoring any traffic that does pass through the corporate network.
But the limitation is what I touched on.
It is. This methodology is increasingly challenging in a fully hybrid or remote work environment where employee traffic isn't consistently routed through your corporate VPN or firewalls. And crucially, it provides no historical discovery. It can't see old assets created before the system was installed. It's a real-time monitor, not a historian.
I see. So the first three methods focus on discovering the users and their activities. But what about the AI that's running inside the applications we already trust? That's where the fourth method comes in, right? API connections or SaaS security posture management.
Precisely. This is arguably the newest and most essential piece of the comprehensive discovery puzzle. SSPM, as it's called, connects directly via APIs to specific, known, and approved SaaS applications already in your StackThink Salesforce, Jira, or Microsoft 365.
And what's it looking for there?
Its purpose is to inventory the app-to-app integrations and the permissions that have been granted. This gives you high visibility into data sharing entitlements and can spot dangerous OAuth misconfigurations where, for example, a third-party app has been granted overly broad read-write access to your core data store.
So if that third-party app has embedded AI, you need to know exactly what it can see.
You have to know. But its limitation is built right into its premise. It's limited only to the known apps you've already connected. It cannot discover unknown shadow apps that IT hasn't cataloged yet.
Which is why you need the other three discovery methods working in parallel.
You need all four.
So the overall takeaway here is that the shift to cloud and remote work makes traditional perimeter-focused tools like CASBs insufficient. They lead directly to those critical blind spots we talked about with shadow AI. The sources really emphasize the need for a perimeterless approach.
That's the key phrase.
A comprehensive, continuous inventory has to be holistic. It needs to include app-to-app integrations that SSPM finds, any connections employees are making to External Model Context Protocol, or MCP, servers, and even the AI usage hidden within the software supply chain of other providers you rely on.
You have to know what is running inside the tools you already trust, even if you didn't install the AI yourself.
Okay, so that's the discovery piece. Once an organization achieves that visibility, once they complete that necessary continuous step, what's next?
The next critical challenge is implementation. Leaders need structured, defensible frameworks to guide their governance policy and their technical controls. And what we're seeing is two leading global standards emerge that organizations really need to understand and align with today.
Let's start with the U.S. standard, which is voluntary and more policy-driven. The NIST AI Risk Management Framework 1.0, or AI RMF.
Right. The NIST AI RMF was published in 2023. It's designed as a voluntary U.S. guideline. Its primary goal is the internal identification and management of risk to foster trustworthy AI.
And its structure?
Its structure uses 4 functional components: govern, map, measure, and manage. It provides a really excellent internal how-to guide for defining, locating, quantifying, and then mitigating AI risk. It establishes a common language for discussing these complex issues across technical, legal, and business departments.
So it defines the principles. What specific attributes does NIST focus on that leaders should be using to evaluate their internal systems?
NIST defines and emphasizes 7 core attributes of trustworthy AI, which really should form the backbone of any internal risk assessment. They are validity, safety, security, accountability, explainability, privacy, and fairness.
So it's basically a rigorous internal self-assessment guideline.
That's a perfect way to put it. It helps organizations identify precisely where their current or planned systems might fall short on these foundational ethical and operational principles.
Now, let's compare that to the other major framework, ISO/IE 42001. This one sounds far more formal and frankly binding.
It is fundamentally different. ISO/IE 42001 is a formal, certifiable international standard. Its explicit purpose is to help organizations create, implement, maintain, and continually improve an artificial intelligence management system, or AIMS.
And it uses a familiar structure.
It does. It adopts the familiar quality management structure, the Plan-Do-Check Act model, or PDCA, which most mature organizations are already using for ISO 9001 or ISO 27001 compliance.
What's the critical distinction here for leadership? Why do both?
The critical distinction is that ISO 42001 provides third-party, auditable proof of responsibility and diligence. If a regulator or a major client asks you to prove you have a reliable governance system, an ISO certification gives you that objective external evidence. NIST is self-assessed.
That makes the complementary value immediately clear. NIST helps you internally design the system based on principles like fairness and accountability.
And ISO provides the structured management system and the external auditability to prove you're doing it.
But is there a risk, though, that if a company focuses too much on the certifiable ISO standard, they might just optimize for paperwork and checking boxes rather than actual safety and principle, which is where NIST's focus lies?
That is the perpetual challenge with any certification, isn't it?
Yeah.
You have to use ISO not as a paper exercise, but as the system for consistently implementing the principles defined by NIST. They work best in tandem.
So one provides the philosophy, the other provides the structure.
Exactly. NIST gives you the philosophy and the common language. ISO delivers the robust, structured management system you need to put those philosophies into auditable, demonstrable practice consistently across your entire enterprise.
Okay, that covers the structural and philosophical frameworks. But we talked about AI being a dynamic risk. It changes in real time. We need a framework that governs the model while it's in motion.
And that's where Gartner's AI Trism framework comes in: AI trust, risk, and security management. This acts as the real-time operational guide.
Why is that so essential?
It's essential because AI risks are not static. A model can exhibit drift, it can start producing harmful or biased outputs, or it can suffer a prompt injection attack the moment it's deployed. You need a layered security stack to manage these dynamic risks in real time. It moves you from policy and planning to actual enforcement and monitoring.
Let's dedicate some time to unpacking the 4 critical layers of AI Trism and what they demand of leadership in terms of resources and process change.
Absolutely. The foundational layer is AI governance. This is where the visibility and traceability we've been talking about are formalized into actual policy.
So the leadership imperative here is?
The imperative is to establish that comprehensive AI catalog, which is the result of our earlier shadow AI discovery efforts, and then set up continuous evaluation protocols for all those cataloged assets. This layer ensures every single model has an owner, a defined risk level, and a documented purpose.
Okay, what's the next layer up?
The next layer is runtime inspection. This is where the real-time enforcement and technical control happens. It involves continuously monitoring the AI's inputs, its internal processing, and its outputs to detect anomalies and enforce organizational policies automatically.
So for leadership, this means implementing automated remediation for common violations.
Exactly. Things like detecting prompt injection attacks that are designed to leak data, or identifying real-time bias violations as the model is making operational decisions, like, flagging an applicant in a financial decision system.
So, governance sets the rules, runtime enforces them in real time. Then we shift back to the raw material, the data itself, with information governance.
Correct. This layer manages the entire lifecycle of the data used for training the AI, which, as we discussed, is where most bias and security vulnerabilities originate. The imperative here is strict. It means you enforce rigorous data classification, data lineage tracking, and strict access controls for all AI training sets and inference data. This ensures privacy and security are maintained throughout the model's entire life, from collection all the way to retirement.
And the final layer.
Finally, we have the infrastructure and stack layer. This covers foundational hardware and software security, including things like API key management, ensuring the physical and digital environment is secure.
And there's a crucial strategic point here from the source material that impacts budget, right?
A very critical one. It's about vendor lock-in. Enterprises must actively plan for independence from single model providers. Relying solely on one major LLM provider is a long-term liability, not just for cost control and scalability, but for the resilience and security of your AI applications. This layer demands continuous assurance and evaluation applied both before and after deployment to ensure models stay aligned with your objectives.
Here's where the strategic planning challenge for any global company gets, well, dramatically more complicated. 2025 marks what the source material is calling the Great Divergence.
A very fitting term.
On one side, you have the European Union moving aggressively toward binding punitive law. On the other, the United States, through executive action, is pivoting toward deregulation and competition.
And this creates a deeply contradictory global landscape that every multinational enterprise has to navigate, often at the same time.
So if we look across the Atlantic first, the European Union AI Act is, it's arguably the single most important legal document in global AI governance today.
Without a doubt. It is the world's first comprehensive, binding legal framework for AI, and it uses a mandated four-tiered risk-based approach to compliance.
Okay, let's unpack this risk-based approach thoroughly, because classifying your systems into these tiers is what determines all your subsequent compliance obligations and financial exposure.
Right. At the highest level is unacceptable risk. These systems are strictly prohibited, banned, because they threaten fundamental human rights.
What are some examples of that?
The sources cite definitive examples like government social scoring systems, which assign a trustworthiness score to citizens, or real-time untargeted biometric surveillance in public spaces. Deploying these systems means an immediate, massive fine.
Okay, so that's the prohibited tier. What's next?
Next, and this is most relevant to large enterprises, is high risk. These are AI systems used in sensitive sectors like critical infrastructure, healthcare, finance, think credit scoring, or HR, like automated resume sorting or performance monitoring.
And these are not prohibited.
Not prohibited, but they are subject to extraordinarily strict compliance mandates. This requires extensive technical documentation, mandatory risk management systems like the ISO framework we discussed, rigorous data quality standards, built-in human oversight, and robust cybersecurity testing. This is where most enterprise models are going to fall.
And what about the everyday generative AI tools that employees are using, the chatbots and so on?
The majority of those consumer-facing tools fall into the third category, limited risk. Systems like standard chatbots, virtual assistants, or AI-generated content generators fall here.
And their obligation is about transparency.
Exactly. The critical point here is that users must be immediately informed that they are interacting with an AI system, and any AI-generated content like deepfakes or synthesized images needs to be clearly labeled. It's all about building public trust through mandatory disclosure.
And the final, lowest tier.
Finally, you have minimal risk. These are low-impact applications like basic spam filters or simple recommendation engines. These have no binding obligations under the Act, though adherence to voluntary best practices is still encouraged.
The implication for a global company is immense, specifically because of the Act's extraterritorial reach.
That's the key.
Even if you're headquartered in the US or Asia, if you market or distribute any AI systems or products within the EU, or if your AI's outputs affect EU citizens, you must comply.
And the timeline is aggressive. Prohibitions on unacceptable risk systems start to apply in February 2025. Rules for general-purpose AI models start in August 2025, with full compliance for high-risk systems following rapidly in 2026 or 2027.
That requires immediate resource-intensive auditing and risk classification of every AI system in use today.
Now, let's pivot sharply to the U.S., where we saw a massive policy-level reversal in federal policy right at the beginning of 2025. This signal is just as important as the EU Act, but for entirely different reasons.
That's right. The U.S. regulatory pivot involves the revocation of Executive Order 14110, which had a strong regulatory-heavy focus on risk and safety. and its replacement with Executive Order 14179.
And the new focus is explicitly stated as prioritizing global AI dominance. It seeks to rapidly roll back what the new administration views as burdensome regulation that significantly hampers domestic innovation and competitiveness.
This reversal of 14110 is a huge signal to the tech industry.
It is. It essentially lowers the cost of compliance for U.S. developers, encouraging speed over mandatory safety frameworks. This new shift is supported by a comprehensive federal plan called Winning the Race.
And what does that entail?
It's a multi-agency strategy focusing intensely on challenging state-level AI regulations, like those we've seen emerging in California and other states, that are deemed inconsistent with a national, minimally burdensome policy designed to ensure U.S. technological leadership.
This highlights the move toward federal preemption. The source material notes that the Attorney General has been directed to establish an AI litigation task force.
And its specific job is to challenge state laws on constitutional grounds if they're deemed to slow down innovation or create inconsistent compliance requirements across state lines.
Furthermore, federal agencies are instructed to review and rescind any previous policies from the prior administration that present obstacles to speed or technological advancement. The goal is centralization and deregulation at the federal level.
So what does this great divergence ultimately mean for the leadership of a global enterprise? It creates the absolute necessity of a dual-track compliance strategy.
You have to do both.
You have to. You must account for the highly deregulatory federal climate in the U.S., which encourages rapid innovation, but at the very same time, prepare for potential fragmented state-level actions and the exceedingly stringent binding enforcement coming out of the EU.
The risk landscape is fractured. You have to be both innovative for the U.S. and highly risk-averse for the EU simultaneously.
It's a very difficult balancing act.
We've established the policy frameworks, the regulatory landscape. Now we have to turn to the operational reality, the technical controls you need to translate those policies into measurable, defensible action.
Right. This centers on three core areas that directly address the liabilities we discussed: explainability, bias auditing, and data privacy.
Let's start with explainable AI, or XAI. The goal is simple, but the execution is deeply complex, making AI decision-making processes transparent and understandable to humans.
And not just for ethical reasons. It's a regulatory necessity, especially with the EU AI Act requiring a clear right to explanation for high-risk decisions.
The central tension leaders have to address here is the inherent trade-off between accuracy and explainability.
That's the classic dilemma. Complex deep learning models are highly accurate, but they are notoriously black boxes, making them incredibly hard to explain. Simpler models are easier to interpret, but they might be less accurate. XAI is meant to bridge this gap.
So if a high-risk model denies a mortgage application, we can't just say the algorithm said no. We need tools to look inside the black box. What's the technical toolkit for XAI that organizations should be deploying?
There are three key advanced methodologies detailed in the sources. The first is LIME, or Local Interpretable Model Agnostic Explanations.
How does that work?
LIME is powerful because it generates explanations for individual predictions. It works by simplifying the complex model just around that one single data point, essentially creating a transparent local model to explain why that one loan applicant was rejected, without needing to explain the entire system.
Okay, so that's for individual cases. What's next?
Second is SHAP, or Shackley Additive Explanations. SAP is more complex and technical. It uses concepts from cooperative game theory to quantify the precise contribution of each input feature to the final outcome.
And why is that valuable?
It provides highly valuable mathematical traceability. It demonstrates precisely the weight the AI placed on one factor, like credit history, versus another, like current income. It's essential for regulatory defense.
And third, for management and non-technical stakeholders, the people who need to understand the why without wading through code.
For them, we use feature importance charts. These are typically integrated into interactive dashboards. They visually demonstrate exactly how specific high-level variables, say age group or product type, influence the model's overall business outcomes.
Okay, let's move on to bias. The source of bias in AI is almost always flawed human-collected training data or flawed decision criteria that inadvertently create disparate impact. Audits are no longer optional.
No, they are mandatory to promote fairness, specifically testing for differential performance across protected classes. For example, testing if a hiring algorithm performs worse for female candidates than for male candidates, even if gender was removed from the inputs. The good news is that 2025 has provided specialized toolkits to tackle this.
Let's name the leaders here. First, we have IBM AI Fairness 360, or AIF 360.
Right. AIF 360 is a comprehensive range of debiasing methods. And critically, these can be applied across all three stages of the AI lifecycle: pre-processing the data, in-processing during training, and post-processing the outputs. It's a holistic bias management system.
Then there's Microsoft FairLearn.
FairLearn offers an interactive dashboard focused on visualization. It allows teams to clearly see and quantify disparities in model performance across demographic groups. This visualization makes it ideal for high-stakes models used for lending or hiring, where regulatory scrutiny is highest.
And for more collaborative, browser-based analysis.
The Google What If tool provides a low-code or even code-free platform for that. It allows browser-based visual analysis of model behavior and fairness, which promotes better collaboration between the data scientists building the models and the ethics or legal reviewers who need to assess the risk without deep coding expertise.
We also need specialized testing for generative AI, which operates differently. The sources recommend red teaming, which is periodic adversarial testing. What are the specific objectives there?
You're trying to stress test the system in ways a typical user wouldn't. The objectives include identifying vulnerabilities like jailbreaking, where a user bypasses safety guardrails testing for data leakage risks, where the model reveals proprietary info, and identifying unauthorized model behavior, like producing toxic content when it's put under stress. This has to be a continuous, cyclical process.
Okay, that brings us to our third operational area: data privacy.
And this is arguably the most strategic one. Privacy-enhancing technologies, or PETs, are quickly becoming essential. Their immense value is that they allow analysis and insight sharing from massive data sets without exposing the sensitive raw data underneath.
Which transforms privacy from a liability into a strategic asset.
Exactly. It's a huge shift.
It sounds like a technical magic trick using data without actually seeing the data.
Let's delve into the 4 key technologies that make up the PET's toolkit. First, we have federated learning. The mechanism here is a paradigm shift. It trains AI models without ever moving the personal data off its origin server or device. The raw data stays local, and only the insights or model updates are shared and aggregated centrally. This powerfully supports data minimization principles.
That solves the problem of moving the data, but the data is still vulnerable during processing if it's decrypted, right?
That's the problem solved by our second technology, homomorphic encryption. This is a powerful cryptographic method that allows mathematical operations to be performed entirely on encrypted data. The data never needs to be decrypted during active computation.
So even if the server is compromised, the data is safe.
Correct. Third is synthetic data. This involves generating artificial data that closely mimics the statistical qualities of real data but contains no actual PII. It's used extensively for model development and testing when the real data is too sensitive or scarce to use directly.
And
finally, there is differential privacy. This technology introduces controlled randomness, or noise, into the results of database queries. The goal is to ensure that while aggregate information remains useful, the added noise guarantees that individuals cannot be identified from that information.
The strategic advice from our sources is clear. Organizations must consider PETs from the very outset of any AI project, a philosophy known as privacy by design, to manage long-term costs. You can't retrofit this stuff easily.
No, you really can't.
Okay, we've talked about what to look for, what standards to adhere to, and what technical controls to deploy. Now let's talk about the who and the how. Successful governance is inherently multidisciplinary.
Absolutely. Our sources outline 2 essential internal structures needed to manage this complexity, starting with the body that sets the policy.
The AI Governance Committee and Ethics Review Board.
Exactly. This acts as the central authoritative body for policy enforcement and risk mitigation. And it needs senior multidisciplinary membership. This is not just an IT committee.
Who needs to be in the room?
It must include the chief data officer, the CISO, the CTO, the general counsel, and crucially, domain-specific business unit representatives who understand the commercial and operational context of the AI they use.
That seems like a large group. What are the specific mandated responsibilities that need to be delegated within that committee to ensure it's actually efficient?
The structure has to be hierarchical. The executive council within the committee sets the overall risk posture and provides the final non-negotiable approval for high-risk deployments. We're also seeing the emergence of the Chief AI Officer, or CAIO, who coordinates the overall AI strategy and manages the use case inventory.
Yeah, and legal's role.
Privacy in legal ensures continuous alignment with global mandates, like the EU AI Act and GDPR, and they review all external contracts and data sharing agreements.
The committee's first and most critical foundational task is to draft an AI charter.
Yes, and this charter is more than just a mission statement. It has to explicitly outline the purpose, the long-term goals, and critically tie all AI initiatives directly to the enterprise business strategy. For instance, explicitly stating that AI development will focus on compliance and operational excellence before pure market disruption.
And to formalize that control, especially with the shadow AI threat, the sources mandate a clear intake process before any new tool or model is used.
Absolutely essential. This process formalizes what employees were previously bypassing. Every single new AI tool, custom-built model, or major third-party integration must be submitted via a standardized, centralized form. This form must detail the business purpose, the training data lineage, the required human oversight, and the results of a formal risk assessment. This moves the organization from reactive firefighting to proactive risk management.
While the governance committee sets the rules, what the AI Center of Excellence, or COE, handles the how-to.
That's right, the adoption and technical execution. It gathers top technical talent to share best practices and ensure consistency across development teams.
What does a mature COE actually do?
A mature COE handles the operational backbone of AI development and deployment. They're responsible for implementing automated data lineage tracking. They maintain a central model registry for version control, performance monitoring, and retirement management, ensuring older models are safely taken offline. And crucially, the COE is also responsible for organization-wide AI literacy training.
Making sure not just data scientists, but all employees understand their responsibilities.
Exactly. And for organizations building custom models, the COE defines the strict requirements for technical documentation and security testing. This emphasis on process ensures what the sources call minimum viable governance, or MVG.
Which is?
MVG is the philosophy of applying the minimum, lightweight, but necessary controls that protect innovation while still satisfying rigorous standards like NIST and ISO. The goal is to embed governance at the development stage, preventing costly retrofitting and ensuring speed without sacrificing safety.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the algorithmic paradox, what is the clear strategic path forward for leaders operating in this high-stakes, low-visibility environment?
We've covered a vast amount of ground, but 3 strategic mandates really stand out as non-negotiable for success in 2025 and beyond.
What's number 1?
First, visibility is prerequisite. You must invest immediately and continuously in those discovery tools, the multi-pronged methods we discussed, that can capture the long tail of employee usage, effectively eliminating the immediate threat of shadow AI. Without knowing what you are governing, any policy you draft is merely theoretical.
Number 2.
Second, integrate, don't silo. AI governance cannot be a standalone department fighting for budget and relevance. You have to integrate it into your existing enterprise risk frameworks. Update your procedures for authority to operate, update your privacy review checklists, and mandate procurement processes to route AI projects through the new governance committee.
And the final mandate.
And third, the conditional autonomy goal. Your ultimate aim must be a state where AI systems operate within a well-guarded playground of oversight and enforcement. This system must ensure continuous auditability through runtime inspection and mandated human review points for all high-risk systems.
Given the dramatic regulatory split we discussed, the stringent laws in the EU versus the deregulatory approach in the U.S. global companies face a massive challenge. Our sources conclude that the most strategically defensible choice is adopting the highest common denominator approach.
I agree with that conclusion.
This means aligning your internal policies and technical controls with the strictest international standards, specifically the EU AI Act. This prepares you for global markets, it satisfies the most demanding compliance needs, and crucially, it builds the foundational trust necessary for long-term sustainable innovation, regardless of where U.S. federal policy lands next year.
And if we look ahead, as AI evolves rapidly toward autonomous agentic systems capable of initiating actions and making complex decisions without direct human intervention, the governance landscape shifts again.
How so?
The sources suggest that the ability to audit and mathematically defend every single decision made by a machine using tools like Eshape and Lime will become the ultimate differentiator for the trustworthy enterprise. This transforms governance from a necessary chore into the foundational architecture for sustainable innovation.
So a final thought for our listeners to take with them.
We encourage you to consider what specific real-time mechanisms you rely on today for that fundamental right to explanation, and whether they are truly adequate for the autonomous AI systems that are, well, already on your doorstep.